Hello, my name is Melinda Andrea Celeste Burns, and I am the daughter of Custodio Catolico Celeste, and I'm here to tell you the story of his life. So let's begin. He was born in the Philippines on a small island called Panay. On the island of Panay, he was born in a small village or barangay, or as we would call it, a barrio, called Caballao, which is adjacent to Lampaya, Barrio Lampaya, where the rest of his family grew up. Dad's parents' name are Eusebio and Andrea Celeste. We have a little information on who Andrea's parents were, but I couldn't find anything for Eusebio. As you can see from the chart here, both Andrea and Eusebio had the same last name. However, they were from different families, so there was no familiar relation other than their names. Andrea's parents, from we can find out her mother's name was Modesta Serbo, and her father's name, first name, we couldn't find. It just says Celeste. But then from there, we find out that her grandparents were called Don Juan, and then her grandmother's name was Donna Fatima Cuervo or Serbo. So that's as far as we can get as far as the family tree for Andrea. You could also see that she had some siblings, and if you look down, you'll see a name, Isidro Celeste. He's related to us, and he actually lives in Hemet, and he gave me some of this information, so that was pretty cool. Okay, he was baptized, according to this, on October 7th, 1905, and it said that he was born on October 3rd, 1905, but we will see in other documents that he was either born 1906, I think there was one that said 1907, but anyways, we go with what Dad said, October 5th, 1905, okay? So now we move on to some family members. This photo is a picture of Leonila, who is Dad's sister. And then the next photo is of Auntie Leonila and Rosalia. Then comes the next picture, a picture of Auntie Leonila and her husband Diosdado. Don't they look a lot like Dad? Then the next picture here is of Noberto and a baby, also called Leonila Jr. Noberto is the cousin that came and visited us and lived with us for about a year. Then the next picture is cousin Elsie with her baby Jonas. Well, Jonas is a big boy now, so it's not that little anymore. This was from a long time ago. Then the next picture is a funeral procession from, I think it's from Rosalia's funeral. And what they would do is they would have the wake in the home, so the casket would be displayed there for people to come and say goodbye. Then they would take and put the casket in a car. Sometimes they walked it to the church, depending on how close it was. They would walk it to the church, and they would have a mass over the deceased, and then from there they would go to the cemetery where they would lay them to rest. So there's more pictures in the folder down beneath all of this in your folder of some of those funeral pictures. This next picture is a picture that's from Rosalia's house, and that's where everybody is living right now. From left to right is our cousin Raquel, and she lives actually in the UK now. and she is the daughter of Rosalia. And then there's a distant relative, the young lady there, and then next to her is our cousin Violeta, who is the daughter of Carmelita. And then there's our cousin Herminio, who is the son of Carmelita. Next photo is also at Rosalia's house, and you can see there's a house being built with brick and mortar there. It's in the process. When we got there, it was completely done. But this is Abelardo and Norberto. They're sons of Carmelina. Again, this is Norberto, the cousin that came and stayed with us for a while. And then our cousin, Cynthia Caro. So she was one of the cousins that was with us when we went on our tour of the Philippines, Boboy and I. So our next picture then takes us to a big family picture. So from the front, left to right, is an unknown cousin. And then there's Alicia, and then there's another unknown cousin. Then in the back row is our cousin Violeta, and then Belen, Rosalia, and then there's Elsie's cousin, then Herminio, Uncle Federico, and then baby, or as we call her, Leonila. So that's who is in this photo. Next photo is a picture of our cousin Rosalia and our Uncle Federico. And this is also in Barrio Lampaya. This is Rosalia's house. So most of the photos you see will be at Rosalia's house. Then this is another picture of our cousin Rosalia. I'm sorry, standing left to right is Jose in the back, Norberto, and the Herminio. This is from left to right. And then sitting is our cousin Violeta, Alicia, and Rosalia. Okay, let's get back to Dad's timeline. So, anyways, he lived in the Philippines till he was 22 years old. And then he came over to the U.S. from Manila on the SS President Jackson. Here is a picture of the ship that he came over on. And just a little story about Dad going over there, and Uncle Tony had been over there previously. Story told to me by Violeta was that Uncle Tony was a rebel, a real rebel. He didn't want to listen to Grandma, so they farmed him out to a family member, an aunt of some, and I don't know which aunt it was, and didn't stop him. He was a rebel, and he got tired of being told what he can and can't do. He was he thought he was the oldest son and he could do whatever he wanted. So he decided he was going to venture to the United States. Well, he didn't have the proper paperwork, so he stowed away on one of the passenger ships, and that's how he came over to the United States. So after being there for a few years, he convinced Dad to come over to the United States where he can get a job and they can send money back to the family, because Uncle Tony was sending money back to the family so they can live a little better, pay for whatever they needed, because they had a rice plantation at the time. That's how they made their money and stuff like that, and then whatever bartering that they did. So anyway, Dad came over, and here is the passenger list showing Dad being on there. So by 1935, in the census, when Dad was 30 years old, it shows him living in LA with a gentleman by the name of Earl C. Anthony, who was a wealthy man. And there are some files in the folder included in this that tells a little bit about Earl C. Anthony. Dad was a houseman for him. Dad had must have had a girlfriend back in the Philippines because he went back to the Philippines in 1936 when he was 31, along with his employer, Earl C. Anthony, and he married Magdalena Celeste on May 28, 1936, in Kalinag, Iloilo, Philippine Islands. Then it shows them later on, a month or so later, arriving in the U.S., coming from Hong Kong, showing that he was with Earl C. Anthony. Then in 1940, during the census, he was 34 years old. It shows that Earl C. Anthony was living in the Los Feliz Park area of Los Angeles, and Dad was still working for him as a houseman. Unfortunately, by 1943, when Dad was 37, he lost his wife Magdalena from tuberculosis. She had stayed in the sanatorium for about a year and a half, and is now resting in the same cemetery as Dad is, but on the opposite side of where he is. Then we get to 1947, when Dad is 41 years old. Don't know where he was working, if he was still with Earl C. Anthony or if he had started working somewhere else, but this is when he petitioned for naturalization, and he was living at 319 West 2nd Street in Los Angeles. And then by March 28, 1947, he became a natural citizen. And because World War II was going on at that time, he signed up for the draft, and he had his draft card. So you'll see his draft card right here. Well, again, apparently he did not go. We do see that Uncle Tony was in the Navy, but Dad was not drafted. But in 1948, when Dad's 42, he gets married to Mom. But at that time, the state of California didn't allow interracial marriages. So they went down to Nogales, Mexico, and they got married down there, along with Auntie Linda and Uncle Al. And many of you know the story, or a similar story, but the story I was told was, Grandma and Grandpa Zamora couldn't afford to feed 2 extra mouths, so they offered their 2 daughters to single gentlemen at Don the Beachcombers. So they were working together at Don the Beachcombers at this time, and Dad raised his hand and said, "I'll take one." Uncle Al said, "I'll take one." So they had a double wedding. So you'll see some wedding pictures here of the double wedding, one in Nogales, and then there's some pictures of them renewing their vows in Los Angeles. So now that they're married, 1948, he's 42 years old. A year later, in 1949, they have their firstborn. He's 43 years old, and our oldest sister, Andrea, is born. And then in 1950, they were busy because when he was 44, Anthony was born. And in that census, it shows him working in LA as a bartender at Don the Beachcomber, and that Uncle Tony was living with them. They were both, or all of them were living with Grandma and Grandpa Zamora. Wow. So I'm guessing somewhere between 1950 and 1953, when Pearl was born, they had purchased a house in Norwalk, because we show pictures of us, all little ones, there in Norwalk. So you'll see a lot of pictures. I'm going to show them to you right now. So Dad died on September 30th, 1992. Cause of death was a cerebral hypoxia due to respiratory failure and idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Dad left behind his wife Ophelia and 5 of his children: Pearl, Boy, also known as Custodio, Melinda, Velma, and Anna. He also left behind approximately 11 grandchildren. That would be Jeanette, Trina, Mark, and Anthony Celeste, Christopher, Eric, and Christina Burns, Michael, Andrew, David, and Nikki Guerrero.